Thank you.
She's going to be teaching us about the art of fermenting and doing a little demo. So can everyone get a handout? Or give everyone one?
Thank you very much. Hello. I'm really excited to be here. I am born and raised here in Berkeley, Oakland, and I've never done any kind of talk or presentation on the Berkeley campus at all, so it's kind of nice for me to be here. So my name is Heather, and I'm a certified raw food chef and instructor. I teach classes for Cafe Gratitude, for Whole Foods, the Institute for Urban Homesteading. I teach classes all over the Bay Area and actually the world. I'm going to Copenhagen in about 10 days to teach a raw food intensive there. So it's fun. My business is Raw Bay Area, and mostly what we do is teach cooking classes, raw food cooking classes. I also do personalized coaching, helping people get an understanding of how to eat raw, how to eat vegan, and to help them transform their kitchens and their lives. I'll start off by telling you a little bit about myself and my background. Then I'll tell you a little bit today about fermentation and why you would want to eat fermented foods. And then I'll finish up with a demonstration of how to make your own sauerkraut and how to make your own kombucha. Does that sound good? Okay. So, in terms of questions, I really love your questions. I think we should just do questions in sections. I'll tell you a little bit about myself, and if you want to know more, I can tell you that. So my journey through the world of raw vegan started pretty early. At about age 14 or 15, I started developing vegetarian tendencies. And my parents were really excited when I went away to college for many reasons, I'm sure, but one of them including that all of my jars of beans and rice and nothing that I ever labeled, all of that was gone too, and they could go back to eating normally. And after I graduated from college, I worked in all sorts of different cafes and in restaurants in the front of the house, in the back of the house, and I never really thought about the culinary arts as a career. I went into a career in nonprofit and in fundraising, and I did that. I was for 15, 20 years. It's a long time I've been doing nonprofit work. And then I was watching my father, who is in advanced stages of diabetes, get sick and sicker and sicker and sicker. And I knew that for him, there was 100% correlation between how he took care of himself, meaning what he ate, and how little he exercised, and the disease. And that's not the case for everybody, but I absolutely know that as he stopped taking care of himself, he started to get sicker and sicker. And I wanted to do something different for myself, because I knew that I was totally ending up the same way. And I went to Weight Watchers, and I lost a lot of weight, and I didn't feel that much better. And I thought, well, why not? Why don't I feel much better? And so that was my quest for a couple of years, is what do I need to do? What do I need to eat in order to feel better? And by that time, I had cut almost, certainly I had cut all meat and fish products out of my life. I wasn't really interested in going vegan because I really liked creamy things. I like yogurt, and I like cheese, and I like milk, and so I couldn't really imagine getting rid of that. And I was at my husband's family's house. My husband's from the West Bank, and so we were in Jericho, and I just was pulling a book off of my sister-in-law's shelf, and the book was called 12 Steps to Ending Your Addiction to Cooked Foods. And I've got it out there on my table if you want to check it out. First of all, what a crazy title, right? Like, ending your addiction to cooked foods. I didn't know anything about raw food. I had never even really heard the term raw food, but I knew that cooked food was addictive. Far beyond chocolate and caffeine, why do I eat more bread than I probably should? Why am I drawn to certain kinds of foods and not other foods? So I was very curious about the addictive nature of cooked food, and I read the book, and it's by a woman named Victoria Butenko, who healed her family from asthma, from diabetes, from very serious other diseases related to their organs by eating raw food. And after reading the book, I thought, wow, this is a woman what she eats is fresh fruits and vegetables and healthful fats like almonds and walnuts and avocados. And I thought, that sounds very holistic to me. That sounds very nutritious to me. Whole fruits, whole vegetables, and healthful fats. No preserved foods, nothing that really comes in a box and a can, but something that's more directly from the farmer or from her garden into her mouth. And that was really, really exciting to me, to be able to eat food that didn't have a lot of fillers, that didn't have a lot of additives, that didn't have non-food products in them, but really farm-fresh food. And so I said to my husband, I think this is what I want to do, probably for the rest of my life. What do you think? And he said, well, that sounds fine, but don't expect me to eat any of that food, because that's not my path, this is your path. And I said, that's fine, but so I went 100% raw cold turkey, and it was fabulous. Immediately, my skin cleared. Immediately, I felt a level of vitality that I had never felt before. I felt a level of clarity that I had never felt before. All of a sudden, I went from being only somewhat happy to being incredibly happy all the time. Now, that might be a little bit because of the nature of eating food that's not cooked. Probably has a lot to do with the fact that I was no longer eating any food with preservatives, nothing with fillers, nothing with additives, nothing that had gone through a lab before it came to me. And so I knew that it was something I wanted to do for the rest of my life, and my husband convinced me to quit my day job and go to culinary school. So that's what I did. I went to culinary school, I went to raw food culinary school, and then started my own business, Raw Bay Area, and it's 5 years old. So that's a little bit about me, and I want to introduce Lisa Kwan, I think Lisa has been, you've been volunteering with me for years now. Yeah, it's really great. Thank you for being here. You know what maybe we should bring over is the sign-in sheet in case people want to keep in touch with my newsletter. That's at the table. My table is the first table here as you walk down the hall. I have a newsletter if you like recipes and you want to know more. I do everything, like my next newsletter is going to be about knife skills and how to work with knives. So you don't necessarily need to be a raw foodist to enjoy what I make. In fact, the vast majority of people who are come into contact with me really maybe are very curious about raw food or very interested in raw food, but they're also just interested in expanding their horizons and learning, how to prepare amazingly delicious food. So what I'm going to be introducing to you today is fermented foods. And the first time I ever met fermented foods was in culinary school. It was the first week of culinary school, and they taught us how to make sauerkraut. And I was like, ugh, why would anybody want to make that? I was totally disinterested. And it wasn't until a couple of years into my raw food journey where I got really excited about fermented foods, really excited. And now today I eat fermented foods probably every meal. Already today I've had a couple of different fermented foods. So what are fermented foods? Fermented foods are foods that literally the technical term is that they have been putrefied, if you will. They have been turned from their fresh state into a preserved state, and that preserved state is using usually some kind of enzyme, some kind of bacteria, some kind of culture, some kind of yeast to eat the sugars in the food to develop lactic acid that is going to help the food be preserved. So fermented foods, come on in. Fermented foods have been around as long as humans. In fact, we know that we are more bacteria and yeast than we are human, than we are material. So in our body, there are billions of bacteria and yeast, and we could not live without bacteria and yeast. But the important thing is that there's healthful bacteria and yeast, and then there's non-healthful bacteria and yeast. We want to cultivate the healthful ones, the ones that literally help us break down our food, that help us digest our food, and that help us to feel alive, to feel like we have energy, and we have health, and we have happiness. So I mentioned to you the history of fermentation is as old literally as human beings, because we know that bacteria and yeast, if you believe in evolution, they were around even before humans were. Bacteria and yeast, we started as simple cells. And certainly we know that human beings have been eating fermented foods since the Neolithic times. And it started off with beers and wines, with yogurts, with leavened breads. And then each culture got more and more creative. So in Asian cultures, soy sauce and all sorts of different kind of pickled veggies are fermented. In Russia and Eastern Europe, sauerkraut and all sorts of pickled cabbages are the big thing. But we'll also make beet kvass, we'll make all sorts of beverages. So you can find fermented foods that are solid and vegetable based. You can find all sorts of creamy fermented foods like yogurt and kefir, as well as a lot of veggies. So today I'm going to be showing you sauerkraut, which is the veggie kind, and a beverage, which is the kombucha. For me, personally, the transformation of basic food materials into fermented foods is a mystery. It's a miracle, and it's exciting. If you were standing here at the beginning of class, this is where my sauerkraut is, it's the only food that sings. It's going zzz, because it's a fermented food that's releasing gas. And as it's coming out of the partially open jar, it's going zzz. So when I go to teach a fermented class, often my trunk is singing, like quite loudly. Every little fermented food is releasing its gas at a slightly different tone. And what other food does that? I can't think of any other food really that does that. Microbes, which is what eats the food and turns it into something different, they're really great eaters, and it's microbes that we use to clean up oil spills, that we use to clean up kitchens, and because they're just really good eaters and they're good disinfectants, if you will. They're very competitive, and they fight off bad bacteria, and that's why fermented foods are really important for us. We tend to eat a lot of things that have antibiotics in it, antivirals, anti-this and that, and we actually need bacteria. We need certain yeasts. When you eat a fermented food, it increases your digestive abilities because it kills off any bad bacteria in your gut. It repopulates the good bacteria in your gut, and it allows you to digest, to assimilate your food more completely. They've done many, many studies from something basic like whether people who eat yogurt have less incidence of salmonella or not, and the answer is yes. People who take heavy doses of yogurt with live bacteria in it have less incidence of salmonella. But also even children with ADD and autism, when given a very heavy regimen of certain kinds of fermented foods, seem to dramatically improve in their level of ADD and how high functioning they are when it comes to autism. So there's something about the bacteria in your gut, it's almost a second brain, that when your brain is in disorder here, your brain can be in disorder here. But when your brain is in order here, then your brain up here is in order. And this is absolutely what I have felt. I don't like going through the day without eating some sort of fermented food, A, because they're tasty, and B, because they're so good for me. So I want to stop now for questions. Yes?
Do you eat 100% raw food?
No, I don't. I eat mostly raw most of the time. So I was 100% raw for 3 months, and it was awesome. It was great. It was totally working for me. Then I went to India. And I had to make a decision in India, do I cook my food or do I eat raw? And for me, the obvious answer was to eat cooked because I felt it was a lot safer for me. And my energy level went down, my clarity of thinking went down, my level of happiness, just like how I wake up in the morning, went down. And so when I got back from India, I decided that absolutely I want to continue with raw food. But it's not always practical because I can choose my food a lot, but it's hard on my family. What are we going to cook for you? They just would stop inviting me over instead of thinking about like inviting me to bring some food or, so it can complicate relationships. And for that reason, I don't eat raw food all the time. Plus, it's nice to just go out to dinner. And, being vegan is like, it's complicated enough, but usually being raw, I wouldn't say in some ways raw is a little less complicated because it's a little more clear cut. But for me, I enjoy life and I enjoy interacting with people, so mostly raw most of the time works for me. Other questions?
Can you identify raw or vegan, the difference?
Sure. So raw food is food that has not been cooked, that has not been processed, that has not been treated to heat above 120 degrees. So humans, we know that we do okay at 90 degrees. We're actually probably happy. At 95 degrees, we start to feel hot. By 120, it's like our brains are melting. Like literally, the brain I used to live in Bakersfield. At 120 degrees, it's freaking hot and you can't really function. The same thing with the cells in our body and the same thing with the nutrition in our food. Not all nutrients, but many nutrients above 120 degrees really cannot do their cancer fighting. They cannot provide you the same level of health and vitality. So on a raw food diet, we don't heat our food above 120 degrees. Now, most raw foodists I know eat cooked food. We live in a cooked food world, but what we choose deliberately on a day-to-day basis is food that is not generally raw foodists or vegans, so no animal products at all. Although many raw foodists still eat beef products, but other than that, nothing that has come from an animal. It's plant-based foods. So that's the definition of vegan, is only eating plant-based foods. And on a raw food diet, since we're really not cooking, we don't eat very many beans. We don't eat very much rice, because obviously you'd have to cook that. I think you missed at the beginning when I defined it a little bit, because I said it's fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, and healthful fats like avocados, nuts, seeds, coconuts, these sorts of things. Okay? We also tend to do oils, olive oil and sesame oil, that sort of thing. Okay, can I jump into kombucha? Would you like to learn how to make kombucha? Okay, so kombucha is a very ancient beverage that has been fermented. It's traditionally known to come from Asia, and basically it's a sweet tea. Kombucha is the easiest thing to make in the world. Many people go to Whole Foods and will buy a jar this big for $7 or $5, and they'll buy several bottles a day. You do not need to do that. What you need is a SCOBY, a symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeasts. This is a SCOBY. The SCOBY grows from other SCOBYs. The white stuff is cellulose. Sometimes it's called a mushroom, but of course it's not a mushroom. It's just a culture, a symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeasts. And the acronym is SCOBY. You might get a SCOBY from a friend. You might grow a SCOBY from finished kombucha. And I also have SCOBYs right here in these jars to sell if you want to take some home and get started right away. So like I said, the white part is cellulose. Nobody knows where SCOBYs came from, chicken or the egg. We just know that they probably are very ancient and they came from Asia. You take a SCOBY and sweet tea, you ferment it together for 10 days, and your kombucha is done. It's as simple as that. But of course, I'll give you the technique around it. So what you'll do is you'll take boiling hot water, and I gave you the recipe here of a gallon of filtered water. And then you'll take your favorite tea, any kind of tea, black tea, green tea, mate, but I don't recommend herbals, because the herbal teas don't have the tannins in them that the kombucha SCOBY really likes in order to grow. So you'll take a couple of tablespoons. This is my favorite tea. It's made specifically for kombucha. If you want to get started, I brought some of it because I've experimented with tons of teas. And ultimately, there's only a few that I think taste best. And so that's what I brought for you. This is a combination of white tea and oolong tea. And this is made by a friend of mine who is a kombucha master brewer. And she blends lots of different ones, and this one is just one that I like. So I'm going to brew tea. Anybody here not know how to brew tea? Anybody here never brewed tea? Tea bags and boiling hot water. Jeff, you've boiled tea before, haven't you?
I'm not sure what brewed tea means.
Boiled tea. Boiled tea, huh? Yeah, so let me just get this part. So you take boiling hot water and you put tea in it. And then maybe let it wait to cool down. 5 minutes, 20 minutes, let it cool down. Okay? So this needs a couple of minutes. You are going to, once it's cooled to about, you don't even have to cool it that much. What I'd like to do is, I really want this to sit a little bit so I can make the tea. I can use this for later. But what you do is, once it's kind of room temperature, it doesn't even need to be that close to room temperature, you are going to filter it. And you'll filter the tea bags out using something like this. and you pour it into a large container, which is the container you'll be making the kombucha in. I like containers like this because they have a spigot at the bottom that allows you to take your tea out whenever you want. So fast forward 5 to 20 minutes, all right? The tea is done. Now we're going to pour it in here, and we're going to make it sweet. If I was going to make a gallon of kombucha, I would take this fairly hot water and a very strong tea, and I would add in another cool water all the way up to about here. So then it would end up being a tea that is strong enough to drink, but not too strong, okay? So what I did is, in your recipe, is the right amount of finished water to finished tea, so it tastes good to you, but it should be just a little too sweet to drink. So to make it sweet, I have my sugar in a jar, right here, regular vegan cane sugar, organic cane sugar. You could use other sweeteners, but I don't recommend it. This is the one that tastes the cleanest and the best. Organic, vegan, cane sugar. See? And I'll put in about a cup. I'm just eyeballing it. I'm just going to put in about a cup. And then I'll stir it with my finger. You're not going to drink this, so I can stir it with my finger. I want it to be basically room temperature. Now, just feeling it, I can see that it's a little too warm, so I'm going to add in now some cool water. Will you put the cool water in here? A couple inches of it. So you'll know that it's the correct sweetness when you taste it and you're like, oh, this is really sweet tea. Okay? Not so sweet you want to spit it out, but it shouldn't be like, oh, I'll just keep on drinking. It needs to be a little sweeter than that. Is that clear? Now, all you need to do is put in the SCOBY. Not that much water, I think that's plenty. So you're going to put in a SCOBY that, again, you've gotten from a friend, you bought from me, you can order it online, and if you go, thank you, to my website, rawbayarea.com, I actually have a link to more information about kombucha in my recipe section, and I have some resources about where to buy them. So I've got a SCOBY here. The SCOBY. I'll give this to you so you could start getting this ready to sample out. And this is what the finished product looks like when it's done. I'll be putting the SCOBY on top, and then I'm going to put a cap on it that allows air to circulate. Okay? If you don't have a cap that allows air to circulate, take a t-shirt or cheesecloth, or this is a nut milk bag that I split in half because it was old, and I just put it on here with a rubber band. I'll leave it in a cool place, not cold, but like I'll leave it in the corner of my cabinet, covered on the sides with a towel, because ferments don't really like light. They, like people, like to reproduce usually in the dark. So it's gonna like hang out kind of in the dark, okay, for about 10 days. And you'll know it's done when you taste it and you like how it tastes. You could let it go longer to take a more vinegary taste, especially if you have sugar problems, you're dealing with candida, you want to make it go longer than 10 days. My husband likes it after 6. At 6, 8 days, he thinks it's perfect.
But then how many days does it last after that?
So what you'll do, this is called your first bottling. So after 6 days, you start tasting it. When it's absolutely perfect to you, siphon off the liquid and put it in another bottle like this. Okay? Then you can put it in the fridge and it will last as long as you want it to. It'll last indefinitely in the fridge. But know that when you're fermenting foods, they continue to ferment in the fridge. So they'll continue to get stronger in the fridge. In the fridge, you put an airtight container, airtight lid, but it will continue to ferment. Now, because kombucha is fermenting, it's a little bit fizzy. I like to add flavors beyond original. So after I've siphoned it off from the big jar and put it in a small jar, I'll add flavors. I've got hibiscus that I like a lot. I like goji berries. I like ginger. I gave you a whole lot of different ones to think about on your recipe list. The important thing to know is that because it's still fermenting, it will pop. And if you haven't burped it occasionally, it will explode. So every couple of days, you may want to open it up just to let the gases out. The gases keep it fizzy and yummy, but if you leave it, especially with the sweeteners in it, like the flavorings in it, it will explode. Do you like it? So for some people, it's too strong. For other people, maybe it's too sweet. Everybody likes their kombucha a little different.
There's an alcohol content.
Yes, all fermented foods have an alcohol content, but the one that people really know most about are kombucha. The longer you let it ferment, of course, the more the alcohol it has in it, but it's trace. I've had some students tell me who are very slight, who are very thin, I get drunk off of a big bottle of it. But I personally, I drive on it. I'm not worried about it. One thing to know, though, is you really don't need more than 4, 6, 8 ounces a day. So drinking a huge bottle a day is not probably that good for you, simply because your body likes fermented foods in small amounts. It does best when you eat fermented foods regularly. Don't think that eating a jar of sauerkraut once a month is as good as eating a couple tablespoons every day, okay? Because it's not. For the health of your gut, which is constantly changing the bacteria content, constantly needing to replenish itself, it's important that you eat fermented foods in small amounts every day. A couple tablespoons, a cup here and there. Okay, questions?
Have you ever tried to make it with anything other than sugar cane?
Yeah, I have. In sugar, regular sugar works best. CNH I don't use CNH. I don't want to buy CNH, but I use the most, like CNH white sugar, completely refined. This is a dehydrated cane sugar. Don't use honey because it has antibacterial properties in it. You need to use sugar. Sugar is what it likes best. Well, if you have candida, first of all, read up. If you have candida, you need to read up and choose whether kombucha is right for you, because the SCOBY eats the sugar, not you. You are not eating the sugar. What I understand for people with candida is that sometimes it can aggravate them, but then after continuing the kombucha, it actually makes things a lot better. I am a chef. I am not a doctor. I really could not advise you either way and would never try. I suggest that you read up on it. I know people who are dealing with candida who use it and people who don't. Yeah, but you have to use sugar. Yeah.
Use it without sugar? Can you make...
No, you cannot make it without sugar because the SCOBY will not be happy. Your SCOBY, the symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast, has a favorite meal, and it's sugar. And so you can use sucanat, you can use other kinds of sugars, but they have so much molasses in them that they don't taste very good.
What about coconut palm sugar?
Yeah, you can try with coconut palm sugar, but it's expensive. So, yeah, so if you have a big bag, try it out. Yeah. How much time do we have left? Let's see, 1:55? Oh, okay, so we're doing good.
Refrigerate the SCOBY?
So one rule of thumb about fermentation is when it gets cool, it slows down. So when you want it to slow down, you put it in the fridge. When you really want it to slow down, you put it in the fridge. But normally fermented foods like kombucha like to be out on the counter. So I'm always fermenting in a dark area of my counter top with a towel around it. You will be making a new batch once a week, basically. Once every 10 days, you'll be making a new batch. And you'll see that the SCOBY will continue to grow, adding another thin layer on top. And that's why people give away SCOBYs sometimes. Like, I deliberately cultivate and grow mine for my classes, but other people just, it keeps growing until it gets so big, you're like, oh, I'm going to cut it in half and give it to someone. You can cut it in half this way, you can cut it in half this way, you can tear it. That's fine. Kombucha will have little threads, dark threads. That's some of the yeast. It's not bad, but you don't want to have a huge collection of it, so siphon that off occasionally. I don't wash my jar very often because I'm continuously making kombucha. And you can learn more about the continuous making of kombucha on my website. I feel like I should go to sauerkraut because some of you also came to learn about sauerkraut. I'll take one question if there's a burning question.
You're going to make lemon ginger, so you would add the ginger when you pour it in.
Exactly, add the lemon and the ginger. And ginger's extra fizzy, so just know that you'll have to burp it more frequently for ginger. Yeah?
I was going to ask about, do you feel like there are safety concerns in, how
Yeah. Have you talked to anybody who's gotten sick from?
No.
Exactly. I've never met anybody. When you're fermenting, fermented foods, and in fact, anything related to growing in our food system, the bigger it gets, the more hazards we are exposing ourselves to. So mass producing spinach and mass producing kombucha are going to lend you the same results, which is that things get mixed together on a larger scale than God meant it to be, if you believe in God or whatever the universe meant it to be. Home brewing your kombucha using the description that I gave you, no problem at all. Because you're watching it. You're looking at it every couple of days. No, I don't think you're putting yourself at any hazard. Quite the opposite. I think you're really doing your digestive system a big favor. But stay vigilant and continue to learn from the process. Use clean hands, use clean jars, use basic common sense about sanitation, and you'll do great. Yeah.
How do you add in ginger? Are you slicing it up?
Oh, I like to ginger juice or a grated ginger. The smaller it is, the more potent it will be to make yourself a ginger ale. Yeah, definitely. If it's a bigger piece, it's not an inch great as well than if it was shredded. But you can put big pieces. I mean, it's just going to taste a little different.
Was this fermentation one, or did this go through this flavor? Because it's very good.
Yeah, this one is continuous fermentation. So there's always a little bit of new in there and a little bit of medium and a little bit of quite old. So probably there's 7 days to 30 days in that.
So as soon as I'm done and I put it like in a bottle that has the jar
Yeah.
and it sits in the fridge,
Uh-huh.
I've got my SCOBY. Don't just let the SCOBY sit in a blank.
No, you have to continue. Well, the SCOBY can sit in just sugar water for a little while, but really make your tea. Get in the habit of doing it once a week. And my husband, he just comes by and he just drinks it all the time. Like, people come over to my house and I serve it to them. When I go to potlucks, it's what I bring. I have no problem getting, going through my kombucha, even if I'm going through a period where I'm not that into it. You can also let it sit for 30 days, 60 days. It won't be good. You'd want to dump it down the toilet, but at least your SCOBY would be fine.
Put the SCOBY by itself in a glass jar.
No, it has to always be in liquid. That's what I'm saying. Like, if you are going away, like we're going away, I take my SCOBY with me on the plane. I do. To Copenhagen, my SCOBY's coming with me because they've said we're really interested in kombucha. So I just take it in a small little vial, a 4-ounce vial, because that's what you're allowed on the plane, and I take it, and they look at me crazy and like, what is this? I'm like, it's kombucha, and it's less than 4 ounces, so don't give me trouble. They don't. But if you're going away, I went away to India a couple months ago, and I kept calling my husband saying, please put the kombucha in the fridge, or, I'd say, please, make a new batch. And when I got home, he had done nothing, and I had been gone for 5 weeks. My kombucha SCOBY had been this thin, and then it was this thick. Fine. I cut it in half. I gave it out to some people. It was fine.
Right, let's say you go on vacation for 2 weeks. You just leave it in a jar with drinkable in
Yeah.
somewhere.
Sugar tea would be the best thing, in the fridge, or give it to a friend. Okay, you ready for sauerkraut? You save your questions, and if we have more time, we'll get to more of it. Thank you very much, Lisa. Okay, so there's something magical about cabbage. Cabbage ferments really, really easy. In the East, sauerkraut is kimchi. And in the West, sauerkraut is made with cabbage, with carrots, with daikon radish. In the East, it's made with daikon radish. You can add different kinds of veggies, but you start off with cabbage, because cabbage, for whatever reason, gets microbial activity really well. I prefer cabbage that is very thinly sliced, not in a food processor, not using a knife, but using what's called a mandolin. And you'll just take cabbage, a couple heads of cabbage, and you'll, thank you, Lisa, you will simply shred it like this. You can use a food processor. You can use a knife. The important thing is it has to be very, very, very thin. Lisa, do you mind helping me out here? I'm going to add in and try and do and talk at the same time. So go ahead. So you would basically, I like to do a couple heads of cabbage at the same time so that I end up with a really big batch. All you need for sauerkraut are 2 things. You need cabbage and you need salt. Anything else is fun. Anything else is ancillary. Anything else just makes it a little more exciting. But you need cabbage and you need salt. Use a very high quality salt. I like pink Himalayan salt. I like Celtic gray salt. I don't use sea salt because most of the sea salts have had their nutrition removed. This is a very high quality salt and it will result in a very tasty sauerkraut. Now again, you won't be getting much salt because the salt changes through the process of fermentation. I've given you the recipe about how much salt to put in with your head of cabbage. So I'm going to go ahead and put it in here and then I get my hands in it and start mixing. I think this is all we'll have room for. So maybe we'll just stop here. So this is where you get your anger management taken care of. Because I'm going to use my hands to mix.
Do you ever mix green and red together?
Absolutely, I mix green and red together all the time. Thank you. It's one of my favorite ways to do sauerkraut. To this, I'll add some different ingredients, and maybe, yeah, Lisa, that would be great to have you come on over here with these items. I'll be mixing into it some lemon juice, some garlic, and some dill. Would you mind cutting the dill here? We can show them how to do it. You can use plastic gloves, but frankly, I think it's just you get a better result when you use your hands. Now I'm massaging the salt in here to break down the cell walls so that the cabbage becomes quite moist. You can put green onions. You can put veritably any veggie. Sometimes I put cauliflower or broccoli. So we're going to cut in some dill and some garlic because that's the recipe. Might have to look for the garlic. Yeah?
You mentioned not related to veggies. Could you make the fermented veggies without the cabbage?
No, there's something about cabbage that makes fermentation really easily. And you could ferment. I do ferment other veggies all the time, but I use a saltwater brine. Whereas for this, I'm not making an additional brine. I'm just using it itself.
So if cabbage is necessary, what's the highest proportion of non-cabbage?
It just really depends. It really depends. So I would start experimenting. I'd make one batch with 3/4 cabbage, 1/4 something else, see how that goes, and then go in half and half. Yeah, it really depends. I recommend that everybody start off learning how to make sauerkraut. And then from there, you can start teaching yourself how to make saltwater brines and fermenting other things. Everybody starts off with sauerkraut because it's so easy. Garlic is for sure there, but it's just a little garlic. I'll be teaching how to work with saltwater brines, which sounds more complicated than it is. They are quite easy. In my fermentation intensive, I'll be teaching in July at the Whole Foods in Cupertino, a 3-hour fermentation intensive where we'll learn all sorts of fermented beverages. So can you see here that it's become quite juicy and the liquid's coming out? Pretty amazing, huh? The liquid is coming from the salt that is interacting with the cabbage because there's nothing more than cabbage in here. Okay, now I have some room and I can add in a little more cabbage. Did you find it? Good. Questions?
Do they still have held mandolins in a cooking store?
Most cooking stores, yeah. So you can see that Lisa nicely cut up the dill, and now we're going to cut up some garlic. Now, all fermented foods tend to ferment either in an aerobic environment or an anaerobic environment. Aerobic, meaning oxygen can get in and out, just like the kombucha. Anaerobic means that the oxygen can get out, but not in. Sauerkraut and other pickled veggies prefer anaerobic environments. And you might look at old pictures of old-fashioned kimchi being made, and you'll see they're made in these large earthen pots that were specially sealed to let the bubbles from the fermentation process out, but to not let any extra oxygen in. You'll get more beneficial bacteria when you work in an anaerobic environment. you can still absolutely ferment your food using a typical mason jar with a regular top on it that's loosely closed. You absolutely can do that for your first couple of batches. But ultimately, you need to be fermenting in an anaerobic environment because the strains of bacteria that are most healthy to you are not necessary. They are thriving in an anaerobic environment. The most healthy bacteria populate under anaerobic environments. This is a gross simplification. Okay, so now I'm going to stuff this in to my jar. This is a special jar called the picklet jar that is an anaerobic environment. And I have this thing that I used. Where's the metal? I just saw it. Oh, there it is. An anaerobic environment means that the oxygen and carbon dioxide can get out but can't get in. So it means that your bubbles need to be able to escape without letting extra oxygen in. What happens is the process of fermentation breaks down the sugars and produces lactic acid. And the reason why this doesn't go bad, but instead it gets better for you, is because the lactic acid is holding away the harmful bacteria while the good for you bacteria can start to build.
What are you pushing that?
What? This thing is just a pickling thing. It makes it easier to put sauerkraut and other items you're going to pickle into jars instead of on your floor. It's called a pickling funnel. You can get this at Rainbow Grocery is where I bought mine. So see how much juice has come down? Isn't that amazing? Always when you make your sauerkraut, you have to push it down so that the liquid is completely covering. Otherwise, if you're not submerged in liquid, it has a chance of getting moldy. Let me finish. Mold isn't necessarily bad, but you'd have to siphon it off. So it's better to not let it get moldy to begin with. Now, this has to sit in a dark corner for 7 to 14 days. Then you can put it into the fridge, and it can last well over a year in the fridge. The longer it continues to culture, the more healthful bacteria you get. Now, can you fill this up halfway with a little bit of liquid? And then you can start handing out the samples. Just halfway up to the line with liquid. I have to finish because we are out of time. 2 weeks out on the counter, then put it in the fridge. These picklet jars, I brought some of them if you want to check them out. They're at my table. People like to buy them in different sizes for different amounts of sauerkraut. I think that's all about how to make sauerkraut.
Where do you buy those jars?
At my table. I don't know where else you can get them. This is a special locking mechanism and food-grade glass that made in Italy so that the carbon dioxide can get out, but the oxygen can't get in. So that's how you make sauerkraut. Really, really easy, yeah? What I'm going to do, because we're out of time now, right? Okay, so I'm going to be cleaning up, and I'll go over to my booth. If you have more questions, if you want to talk more, you're welcome. This sauerkraut, in case you're wondering, is about 3 months old, okay? You'll see that there's a zestriness, a zippery to it. If you're looking up close, you'll see that there's bubbles rising to the top from the bottom. It's important that you pack your sauerkraut down really well so that it can be completely submerged, so that the bubbles can come up. Okay, so at that point, the next group is ready to come in. So what I'm going to do is shove myself over to the side. If you want to buy any of these, you can, and you'll find the picklet jars at my table. Thank you all for coming. I'll put out the sauerkraut here for you to come and taste. We've got some spoons.
Is the lemon juice and the dill put in at the same time?
Yeah, the lemon juice and the dill are put in the same time, unlike the